Photography, 5 Things I Wish I Knew Down Cold When I Started, by Ayers. Audiobook recorded by Ayers himself. Introduction. What you're about to read is written to be simple. Please, for the love of whatever you care about, keep things simple. I love photography. I love beautiful moments beautifully captured. And I've been doing this as a paid professional photographer now for over a decade. I'm completely self-taught. I hated school. I used to be a really bad student and not even want to look at a textbook. My study has turned 180 degrees over the years, but apart from that, I discovered the other side of the problem was that the way many subjects are taught doesn't make them the easiest to understand. I now know how to keep learning simplified enough, not dumbed down, but just simplified, so that the learner can actually understand and use what they're being taught. That's the goal of all learning, right? You can go out there and use it and get the desired result. So this book is going to do just that for you. Give you stable, understandable information which works, and so get you on the road to taking quality photographs faster. Nothing unnecessary is included here. Only the basics to getting that nice shot. And the rest just includes your practice so that you can do it smoothly time and time again going forward. You won't become a professional in a day, but you can become pro so much faster than you may think. What is a professional? It's simply getting a top-notch result every time. Right here are the 5 basics I wish I knew down cold when I first started photography. You want it? Then let's get started. Basic 1. What actually is photography? I went through high school for 5 years hating science, mathematics, and English. I didn't really know why I hated these subjects so much until I'd left school, where eventually someone asked me, well, what does the word science mean? I didn't know. I didn't know. Now, this may seem like stupidly simple stuff, but if you don't know what the words mean, much less the words in the title of a subject, then how the heck are you going to understand it, Jim? Just like learning a new language, if you don't know what the words of that language mean, you will get nowhere. Of course I was having trouble understanding a subject if I didn't know what the words meant in that subject. You ever looked in a dictionary at what science, mathematics, or English actually means? You might be surprised, and you might also find that your liking or interest in an entire subject improves once you actually, really know what you're being taught. Interesting. My big happy realization later in my life was that I wasn't a bad student. I could learn. I just inadvertently, without meaning to, bypassed so many words in my reading, which I didn't know the meaning of, that my mind became clogged with misunderstanding. And so, of course, I grew to groan and dislike subjects, because I didn't understand them damn words in the subject. So I couldn't properly receive and appreciate the subject. P.S. If you ever feel at some point while reading this book that you feel bored, tired, disinterested, or hateful of it, then just go back and look for a word which perhaps you don't fully know the meaning of, and look it up in a dictionary. And I guarantee you'll find one. And not just even the big, complex words either. What is the meaning of the word if? You ever looked that one up before? If you did, you might start understanding a lot more than you thought you could. This simple method right here saved my own education. And I can actually enjoy, no, I'm not even kidding, learning again. So I'm sharing it with you too now. So for this reason, and no other, as we go through here, I will tell you what each of the words of photography mean, starting with the first word, photography. It breaks down to 2 parts, photo and graphy. Photo equals light, graphy equals writing. And that's literally all it means. Photography is light writing. writing with light, creating an image with light, not a pencil, not a paintbrush, but using light. And any confusions you may have along the way of learning this subject can be clarified for yourself by simply returning to the meaning of this word. Today, thanks to the chaos created constantly by marketing or influencers, you may have been given a slightly or totally incorrect meaning of what photography is. Photography is all about what camera you're using. Photography can't be done unless you have at least 20 megapixels. $5,000 is the minimum you need to spend to get a cool photo. If you don't have a good eye to begin with, then you can't take good photos. All of this is bullshit. I'm very sorry, not sorry, to say. What is photography? It's writing with light. And that's all it is. So let's clear the air of bad, biased, and strange information and just learn to create nice photos. Photography is light writing. Basic 2. Know the camera. So, we're dealing with light here, huh? Fabulous. Now, how the heck are you meant to capture and handle light when literally you cannot even carry the stuff with your hands? Well, you use this thing called a camera to capture the light. The word camera means a box. Camera equals a box. That's right. Nothing more fancy than a box. The first camera ever invented was literally a wooden box, and they became more complicated from that point onwards. Now, literally, a box all by itself does nothing to capture light. But what is inside this box can and does. Film. Film equals light-sensitive paper. Photos were originally captured, recorded, on a piece of paper which was coated in a special substance which reacted to light. The substance could be imprinted upon by light when exposed, revealed to it. So this piece of film, paper covered in a substance which is sensitive to light, would be hidden inside this box, and then only revealed, exposed to the light when a particular moment was intended to be captured. In the front of the box was drilled a small hole through which light could enter the box and imprint on the film. The hole had a cover on it which was only opened when the desired moment to be recorded on that film was present. Leaving the hole permanently open meant that light would constantly be entering the box and imprinting on the film. And the result of that would be a mishmash of light, which didn't show anything clearly at all, as if a painter mushed all his colors together. That hole was given a fancy name later, which was aperture. The word aperture literally means a hole. Aperture equals a hole. And the little cover which could open and shut to allow in the desired moment of light was called a shutter. Shutter equals a little door in the front of the camera which opens and shuts to allow a moment of light to enter the box. Shutter got its name because it opens and shuts, closes. Am I being too simple here? Well, do you understand everything I've said so far? Good. Then I'll keep being simple because I think it's working. That's a camera. That's its basic parts and how it works. Today, of course, we don't use much of this film stuff anymore. Today we have digital computer cameras to capture and record the light. The digital equivalent of a piece of film is called a sensor. Sensor equals records light which can be transferred to and viewed on a computer screen later. Cameras became much more complicated later as more functions and features were added. But this right here is the basic and most important thing which every camera does. Understand this very well, and actually you won't need to understand much else to take photos. That's a camera. Basic 3. The three controls. All cameras, whether they are in your phone or a fully professional thing, share just three basic functions or settings, which makes capturing light possible. Control number 1. How sensitive it is to light. ISO. When film was first invented, each piece of film had a different sensitivity to the light, depending on how it was made. A low sensitivity meant that you would need a lot of light to make an imprint on it which you could see, useful when outside in full sunshine. A high sensitivity meant that you would only need a little bit of light to make an imprint on it which you could see, useful for nighttime or indoor photos. The sensitivity for each type of film was written in hundreds. As the hundreds doubled, it meant that that particular film's sensitivity to light would also double. For example, 100, 200, 2 times as sensitive as 100, 400, 3 times as sensitive as 100, 800, 4 times as sensitive as 100, 1600, 5 times as sensitive as 100, 3200, 6 times as sensitive as 100, etc. In digital cameras, this was given the name ISO. ISO equals how sensitive the camera sensor is to light. The actual word ISO is not a word at all. It is an abbreviation of the name of the organization which invented it. ISO stands for International Standards Organization. With film, if you wanted a different sensitivity to light, you would need to physically take out and put in a new piece of film of the desired sensitivity. The luxury with digital sensors is you just need to press a button or turn a wheel on the camera to change the sensitivity of the sensor, much faster. That's ISO, how sensitive the camera sensor is to light. Control number 2. How long light is captured for. Shutter speed. The second control is all about that cover on the whole of the box, camera. It's called a shutter because it opens and shuts. This control allows you to change the speed of the shutter, meaning how long it stays open for to let light enter the box and get recorded by the sensor film. Shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions, parts of a second. 30 seconds would be a very long time to let the camera record light for. If you were photographing stars at night, for example, then 30 seconds would be about the length of time you'd need to leave the shutter open for in order for the photo to be bright enough to see, because light from the stars isn't very bright at all. If you were taking a normal everyday photo of your friends, then a normal type of shutter speed would be about 1/125th of a second. 1/125th means that if 1 second was broken up into 125 parts, then one of those 125 parts would be how long the shutter stays open for. In usual photography, 1/125th of a second is a normal average shutter speed, which is good for most photos. If you wanted to capture a very fast moving object, such as a running horse or a falling drop of water, then 1/125th is still too slow to record the moment clearly. You'd get what is called motion blur, blur which comes from too much motion. To capture a fast-moving object and freeze it perfectly in time, then use a super fast shutter speed, something like 1/4000th of a second. That's a super short amount of time for the shutter to be left open. But keep this in mind. The faster your shutter speed is, the less light the camera will record, because you aren't allowing much time for the light to enter the camera and get imprinted on the film sensor. Thus, for fast photos, you will need more light to compensate for this. Shutter speed is simply how long a moment of time the camera will record. As light hits the film or sensor, it continuously builds up on it. like as if you sprayed foam from a fire extinguisher onto a wall. The amount of foam would become thicker and thicker. How long this buildup of light occurs for also determines how bright your photo will be. Thus, a fast shutter speed equals a darker photo, and a slow shutter speed equals a brighter photo. The shutter button on a camera activates this shutter, and so a photo is taken every time you press this button. Does this make sense? We'll come back to this again shortly. Control number 3. How much light is captured? Aperture. Aperture equals hole. Aperture equals hole. The aperture control setting of a camera is simply controlling how big this hole is. That's all. That's literally all it is. The bigger the hole is, the more light can enter the camera at any one time. If the hole is made very small, then less light can enter the camera at any one time. If the hole is made very small, then less light can enter the camera at any one time. The aperture is usually not built into the camera box itself, but is located inside the piece of glass which extends out from the front of the camera. This piece of glass, or actually many pieces of glass lined up in a row, is called a lens. A camera lens simply helps to channel light into the camera, like how the sides of a river channels water in a particular direction. The aperture is simply the opening or hole inside the lens, and this can be made big or small or many sizes in between. Aperture has a special effect to it, which has to do with how light itself works when passing through a hole. The more open the aperture is, the less of the recorded photo will be in focus. The more closed the aperture is, the more of the recorded photo will be in focus. Focus means what distance away from the camera is clearest to see. Parts of the photo which are not in focus will appear blurry. If the camera's lens focuses on an object close to it, then all objects far away will be blurry and the object close to the camera will be clearly visible. The lens can adjust what distance from the camera will be in focus, but the aperture controls how much of the entire photo is in focus. For example, to take a photo of a person with a blurry, soft background, set the aperture size to be very big or open. Conversely, to take a photo of a landscape and have everything in focus, set the aperture size to be very small. Aperture settings are measured in this thing called f-stops. The word f-stop can mean whatever the heck you want it to mean. It's just a made-up measurement for how open or closed an aperture is. F-stops normally range something like this, although different lenses allow the aperture to be set more open or closed than others. f1.4, very wide open hole. f2, f2.8, f4, f5.6, hole about halfway, f8, f13, f16, very small hole, etc. The lower the number, the more open the hole is. The higher the number, the more closed the hole is. Yes, this measurement system is designed to confuse you. This is what the aperture control does. How they all work together. Now, aside from the slight differences in these three controls, they actually basically all do the same thing. They all control how much light is recorded and therefore how bright your photo will be. They all just do this in slightly different ways. ISO is how sensitive the camera is to light. Shutter speed is how long light comes into the camera for. Aperture is how much light comes into the camera at one time. So what this also means is that one control can be used to compensate for another control. For example, I need a fast shutter speed to capture this running horse, but that means my photo will be too dark. Okay, so to solve this, you could either increase the ISO to make the camera more sensitive to what little light is being recorded, or you could open up the aperture more to let more light enter the camera during that moment. The three controls are all connected like this. The trick to getting the camera working how you want is to choose the setting you like. You want a lot in focus, a little in focus. You want motion blur or just a tiny fraction of time captured. And then compensating for this using the other settings to make sure the overall exposure, brightness, is correct for you. Not too bright, not too dark. And that's it. That's the most important controls you need to know to use a camera. Putting the camera in automatic mode will mean that the computer and the camera will be choosing all these three settings for you for every shot. But if you want true control over what your camera is doing, then put the camera into manual mode and do it yourself like a pro. Practice this. It's the most important lesson of the entire camera. Just know these three controls cold and you'll do great. The rest of those buttons and switches which cover the camera like a moldy leper are just bonus features to learn later, once you're already taking great shots. Understand and use these three controls and you can swiftly forget about the damn camera completely and focus on what's really important, the light, which is what we're going into next. Basic 4. It's about the light. Now, what too many people get obsessed with, including myself for what was an embarrassingly long time, is thinking that the camera is going to get a nice photo. They think the camera is most important to a great photo. This is the biggest and probably most destructive myth in photography. It is absolutely not true. This idea was most likely created so as to sell more cameras and make more money, not to create great photographers. It's good for business, hideous for creativity. Why? Because simply this idea doesn't work and prove itself to be the case in reality. The camera is the tool for capturing light. Similar to a painter, his paint and brushes and canvas are his tools for painting pictures. They do absolutely nothing by themselves and will not create a work of art by themselves. Just sit down and watch them for an hour and you'll quickly find this is the case. A Ford GT racing car does absolutely nothing until the artist, driver, is behind the wheel and then makes it create that motion and those maneuvers. Here is where the actual skill of photography begins. You learn about the camera just enough so that then you don't have to put any damn attention on it whatsoever, and can instead focus entirely on what photography is really all about: writing with light. Reread the definition of photography if you still don't believe me. No amount of money spent on an expensive camera will equal you taking a great shot. A pro photographer can take a great photo with any camera. I mean it, because he knows light. The real difference between the amateur and professional photographer is their understanding and control of light. Light happens in front of the camera. No light happens inside the camera. So take your attention away from the camera and look instead at what's happening in front of it. That's where we create our beautiful pictures. The camera will then simply record those pictures. End of story. The two kinds of light. Light itself is, well, it's light. I'm sure you've seen it, unless you're blind, in which case you wouldn't be reading this right now either. Light makes the world and universe visible to us. It is emanated, comes out from, sources such as the sun, light bulbs, fire, lightning, etc. Light has different colors. Light also has different brightnesses. But in photography, the two most important things about light which we need to know is that there is hard light and soft light. Hard light and soft light can both be any color and any brightness, and emanate from any source. But what makes them different is actually not what they look like, but what they don't look like. And by this, I am talking about shadows. A negative or absence of light equals shadow. The transition between light and shadow is the difference between hard and soft light. Hard light has strong, harsh, well-defined, exact shadows, such as you see across people's faces and noses on a sunny day, which makes them look ugly as hell. Soft light has soft, milky, blurry, smooth shadows, such as you see on an overcast day when the sun is behind clouds. Light itself can also be modified, changed, from hard light to soft light through various pieces of a photographer's equipment, not the camera. The direction of the light, the brightness of the light, the color of the light, and whether it is hard or soft is the photographer's paint with which he then paints a recording onto the canvas, which is his camera sensor or piece of film. Understand a bit more why the camera itself ain't so as important as it may seem? Light is at the center of photography. Listed above are all the parts of it. Now you know them. Basic 5. Composition. If you've ever tried to learn something about photography before, then you'd probably been told this word at some point. And yes, it is an important word to know. Composition. To the majority of people who take photos, the word composition means this. Composition equals the placement of objects together in a photo. If you break down the word, it becomes com and position. Com equals together. Position equals where something is placed or put. Composition is the placement of objects together in a photo. Now, from this definition of the word was created a whole series of rules about composition. These rules tell you that if you don't place objects in particular places of your photo, then the photo tends to look not good. I, for one, could not care less about these rules, because to me personally, I've never needed them to take good photos. I use a different definition of this word composition, which works every time. Composition equals the inclusion of objects in a photo which forward the desired message of that photo, and the removal of objects which distract or detract from the desired message of the photo. What is the message of a photo? It's what you want the photo to say to people when they look at it. It's the effect you want it to have on the viewer, the emotion it gives them, the feeling. Because photography doesn't use words like in a book or in spoken language, it needs to have visual objects in it which will say things or deliver ideas to the viewer without needing words. Like music delivers feelings and emotion through sound, photography does this through sight. So composition is what you choose to include in the photo, which will push your message or idea to its fullest, while at the same time removing anything which doesn't push the message or which distracts from the message. And this, my friend, is a bloody skill more than most others. Photography and painting share this same definition of composition, actually, except one uses light and the other uses paint. What objects, shapes, people, expressions, colors, lighting style, clothing, weather, texture, etc. do I need to include in my photo to give it that oomph, that power, that effect on the viewer? That's your composition. And the only test of whether your composition was good or not is whether it delivers the desired effect to others when they look at it. And don't underestimate what I've just said here. You probably will, but time and time again, when I discover a new trick in my photography and tried to figure out why that trick helps the photo, it's because it's aided the composition, which thus helps make the photo's message stronger. Composition equals everything between the four walls of your photograph, helping your photo to speak and give it meaning. That's real composition. Take some time and digest this and see if it makes sense to you. Some people may disagree with what I've just said here, but I use this exclusively and it never fails. So I'm sharing it with you here because it works. In summary, so we've covered what is photography, writing with light. What a camera is, a box with a hole in it and something to record light when it enters the box, a piece of film or a digital sensor. The three controls of a camera: ISO, how sensitive it is to light; shutter speed, how long light enters the camera for; and aperture, how much light enters the camera. The two kinds of light: hard light, strong defined shadows, and soft light, soft, smooth, indistinct shadows. And composition, including objects in the photo which deliver your desired message, and excluding any objects which don't deliver that message. These are your basics of photography. Everything else you might have seen, which apparently makes the idea of becoming a great photographer so complicated and impossible to achieve, are merely built upon these fundamentals, but shoved in your face first as more important than knowing the basics. But know these fundamentals and to hell with the BS, and you'll see better photos in your hands sooner. Of course, there is more to learn, but this is a solid foundation here to give you some hard-won, workable basics to begin with. Check out my online photography course to learn everything from me, in full, all questions answered. thephotographycourse.thinkific.com. It's been my pleasure to help you. Happy practice, and don't let anything stop you. Luke Ayers. About the author. Luke Ayers is an Australian-born, self-taught pro photographer and award-winning filmmaker for over a decade, and has worked internationally for over 600 companies. He additionally operates a growing YouTube channel and teaches 4 online photography courses to over 1,000 students and counting. He enjoys creating art and helping people to understand and do new things, and live a better life guided by their own passions. He cares, he can be blunt at times, his sense of humor is unordinary, but that's how he bloody well likes it.